You're listening to a new episode of the Studio Shangri-La podcast. And this one is about a topic that's at the forefront of my life, and that is creating the flow state and lifelong learning. Creating the flow state and lifelong learning. The flow state. It definitely is a thing in which you feel unhindered and in the task, whatever that might be, or purely just in a state of being that feels like contentment. Achieving or creating flow state for whatever task it is that one happens to be working on, it is a process. It is a thing that must be created or cultivated at times. Because sometimes one can feel bad or quite agitated, and flow state you can't build on agitation or stress. You have to find a way to release and go into the path of least resistance and being fully present in the moment. And you may have heard this a lot. I certainly have, and continues to be true, that to practice a feeling of gratitude and presence in the moment, it really works. Am I saying this is always a simple thing to do? No. It can be difficult depending on the circumstances, and it may even require that one change one's environment somehow, or make an environmental change, or make some kind of decisions that will lead to a clearer thinking or a clearer state of being. The flow state and the zone in which you can get into that, the feeling of gratitude and presence, that is the truth. It's very significant to be able to get to the truth of life sometimes and substitute the artificial stress for, for lack of a better word, a more spiritual or spiritually present state of being. Now, how would you push aside so much stress? And for me personally, it is absolutely having a meditation practice of some kind, whatever that looks like for you, and whatever works to, it's not just clearing one's mind so that there's nothing in there, is changing the focal point and changing the focal point to what feels constructive and, if not joyful, at least content It doesn't have to be an ecstatic state necessarily, just a clear one. So, after the meditation practice, this feeling carries over into whatever task it is, so that the task is an extension of the meditation practice in a way. And flow state, such as what I am doing now. I am pretty much saying this stream of consciousness. The flow state is a leap of faith into one's creative abilities of whatever kind in the moment right now. And faith in oneself and one's amazingly miraculous and complex humanity. And only by being fully present in the moment can one be in the flow of a task. Further describing that, so that whatever it is you're doing is all that exists in that space or pocket of, of time or existence. Such as when I'm making a painting. It doesn't have to be artwork necessarily. This is just an example. There are so many tasks that are creative. When I'm making a painting, that I am in the technique or how I am applying the brush stroke. And I'm in the feeling of that. And I'm not analyzing as I go along. I'm not evaluating as I go along. I'm not stepping outside of things or stepping back. I'm in the task and just doing it, and quite naturally just approving of it as it goes along. And as I mentioned before, it can take some preparatory work and maintenance work, some sculpting work, if you will, to one's mind state that goes alongside getting ready to do something in this manner. And so meditation is one way to prepare oneself for flow state, and it can be very effective. If one is in a particularly agitated state, for example, or distracted somehow, it really can also help to write down affirmations, positive affirmations about whatever it is you're about to do and how you want it to go. Some sort of neutral phrases or encouraging phrases, words, single words that you like and that have to do with the task. I find that written and spoken affirmations are very effective in getting one to calm down enough to be in a flow state. So it can really be a ritual getting into this place or state rather, that in which you can be incredibly focused and productive. Uh, it makes it much more realistic and approachable to understand that it may not be automatic necessarily, and but that you can apply a ritual or process in order to achieve this flow or productive state, in which you can also enjoy what it is you're doing and not uh, be just going through the motions. Yes, the affirmations are especially powerful, especially if you can write and say them. And let's leave some room for, of course, whatever works for you, the individual preferences. But I definitely know that for me, that written and spoken affirmations and meditation also help because they're relatively easy to do. And so in my ritual, I'm focused on positive and constructive messages for me that really enable me to do what it is that I want to do. And here's the thing, oftentimes, new ideas or new ways of doing things will spring up from this meditative state or contemplation. And it springs up from, as Marcus Aurelius put it, supposedly, from the well within. It springs up from the well of knowledge within that one can tap into. And as I've said before, the the well, infinite well of knowledge that springs up from without too. And an increasingly proven field of information, if you will. So, tuning into the gratitude for for all that is, as well as the the well within, and really just the complex, incredible storehouse of history that is inside everyone, and putting it in this perspective and wiping away a lot of the nonsense or artificial stress and getting back to the truth, it really, really enables such a thing as the flow state. And if you've ever felt it, you know that it's great. And appreciate it while it's there. Understanding that it takes repeated maintenance to get back into this way of working. Um, and you can refine or get better at that process and what works for you as you go along. That is what I find. That things could get pretty chaotic, but then if I know exactly what works for me, then I can come back to that state a bit easier. And even after some practice, uh, that much more methodically too. So, keeping one's expectations realistic is also good. That sometimes it might be easier than others to get to this place of purity, I guess you could say. And depending on what's going on around you, of course, there'll be different steps or methods that you might need to employ in order to put yourself in an advantageous position for this. So basically, of relative peace and contentment or gratitude. That's really the key to flow state. And letting the life energy flow through you. Letting the energy of life flow through you. That's what it is. Or letting the. I know people have different beliefs, of course, but the feeling is letting the spirit flow through you, the chi, whatever you want to call it, the energy. I mean, we're surrounded and permeated by a field of energy, and so why not flow with it? Why not uh, use it? This brings me to the second part of the title, which is lifelong learning. And I should preface this by saying, at the end of the day, or beginning of the day, whenever, we get to decide what it is we want to do. And there really don't have to be any heavy judgments or attachments along with that. It doesn't have to be like that. And so, going along with flow state, the fewer attachments there are, the the lighter or the less heavy it can be, the more it can flow. That's not to say that you can't use different emotions to create. You absolutely can. You can use whatever to create or do. But to really get into flow is in a state of allowance and not resisting so much. And lifelong learning is like that. That in order to keep learning, you have to be in some state of acceptance and allowing, and of course, believing that you can. Really, in my book here, there's absolutely no reason why a person cannot keep learning indefinitely. Uh, Physiologically, psychologically, emotionally, all those alleles. However, there's no good reason why uh, a person can't keep learning. And of course, we do automatically on one level. There's really not too much choice in the matter at times. We have to keep learning and growing in some manner. But then, if you're doing that actively and deliberately, it really goes so much farther, of course. That if you're actively engaged in knowing that you can continue growing and developing constructively, that is really a much more powerful feeling. And there's lots of categories, of course, in which one can learn, and there's many different ways in which one can learn. Someone could be engaged in learning a craft or a trade, or someone could be engaged in academic learning and continue whatever path of knowledge. If the whole person, the body and mind, can be continually engaged in something like this, there's always something to live for. And so, in my opinion, that leads to further longevity. If you're allowing yourself to go through these cycles of learning and to continue becoming and trying to add to your knowledge, expand, do things differently, improve on oneself. And when I say improve on oneself, I don't mean that we aren't already amazing, but it seems to me like there clearly are lessons to learn and a lot of knowledge to continue gaining. And I have appreciation for that integrative process. It's an interesting juxtaposition of wanting to continue learning and growing, but yet also knowing that truth of the infinite. Knowing that truth of just how brilliant and miraculous that we already are. And those two things are not conflicting. At least not to me. They go alongside each other. Flow state and lifelong learning. I mean, you can do it deliberately or not, but this particular episode of the podcast is for if you want to be in that creative flow zone for whatever purpose, and you want to be able to put yourself there somewhat frequently. Like an athlete on the field, following through and being just totally in that motion and nowhere else. I would wager a lot of athletes would say that it doesn't just happen at times, although it can. That getting into flow state is a practiced thing. And it's easier if you also accept that learning is a lifelong process. Okay. I think that's a good stopping point right there. I've mentioned some particular techniques that work for me and the foundation of feeling to build on. And staying realistic that sometimes it could be a ritual and a figuring out process of what works for you. Cultivating gratitude by getting back to the simple things, no matter how silly that might seem at first. And then lifelong learning, you know that you can, that anyone can learn anything. It's just a matter of wiping away the limiting beliefs that are floating around at times. And is that always easy? No, of course not. Sometimes it's very difficult, but if you get back to this foundational spiritual truth that we're all endowed with the infinite spirit, it makes it a lot easier. This is my take on things, and this is what works for me, and perhaps it can help you too. All right, this has been another episode of the Studio Shangri-La podcast, creating the flow state and lifelong learning. The website is www.studio-shangri-la.com.